and justice for all.
Well, good morning again. First, I want to thank all the elementary principals who are here today, the team, Dr. De Silva's team, and of course, our board who have readjusted their schedules, realigned their entire day to be part of this meeting. Why this special meeting? I'm sure many of you are thinking about this. Well, the purpose, as states in the agenda, is to talk about elementary art. Over the last couple of weeks, the Board of Education, the administration has received feedback from a group of parents who have expressed thoughts about elementary art. So the purpose of this meeting is to talk about elementary art. The structure is really simple. I believe Dr. De Silva and our team has a quick presentation, and then I will open it up to the board members to ask questions. The first board will ask questions, and then I will ask additional questions, which are really, some of the questions are from the feedback we received from the group of parents, and there was a common repeated theme in that. I'm hoping that this will provide clarity, address some of the concerns or questions, and address the feedbacks that we've heard. Before I give it to Dr. Silva, just 2 quick points, please. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to do this from memory. This conversation about elementary art and why we are where we are today started when Miss Deb Lowe was superintendent. And I believe she was from 2007 to 14, way before I was born. We'll stick to that. But it started with her. Then Dr. Baldwin, who's the superintendent, came in. She carried on this conversation. She proposed reductions in elementary staffing or art teachers. Then Dr. Padafoot did the same. And then, she was interim superintendent twice. And I believe Dr. De Silva, for the second time when Dr. Padafoot, you inherited the budget from her. At that time, the proposed reduction was, we went from a reduction of 6 elementary art teachers to 3. And from community feedback, board feedback, we went to 4 elementary art teachers. And that is where we are today. The rest, I'm sure the building leaders will talk about. And last point, I promise, because we have a very, we would like to idly stop at 9 o'clock, but I want to make sure the board has can ask questions. I completely understand when it comes to kids and parents, you are their best advocate. You're passionate about it. I have been a very passionate parent advocate. I respect that. I just ask that as we continue this journey, if you may hear opposing opinions or points, we're just civil about it. We can have this conversation in civility and we can respect even if we disagree. And I say may because hopefully this will provide clarity and we can move on. So that was the purpose. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
All right, thank you. Well, I leave it to you and then we will go to the board.
Good morning, everyone. And similar to what the chair's description of this morning is, I just want to first thank our elementary principals because it is not easy to pull them out of their schools. And I know that they all had plans for this morning. And the reality is our principals are the individuals that work with our students and our staff and our parents each day, and they know them best. And I think that it is going to be incredibly helpful for the community, whether they're interested in art right now or interested in art later, to fully understand the thinking and the responsibilities that our elementary principals have to that community at large. So a big thank you to them. They're going to start off with, it's not quite a presentation as we traditionally have in Board of Education meetings, but what we did do was provide some context for the questions that we've been asked, either through the Board of Education or I personally. I shared those thoughts with the elementary principals to be sure that at least some part of those questions are interwoven into at least some type of the discussion today. Hopefully they'll come up through the Board of Education questions, but if not, at least we have confidence that our elementary principals have addressed them. So I'm really going to turn it over to them. We do have, I think, a few slides to start, and hopefully as questions come up, we've done our best to prepare with some visuals if they are needed. And I think we're going to do some coordination between the back and the front here to make sure that we have those visuals available to the board. Okay. All right, off we go.
Good morning. John, do you mind putting up our slides?
Jill, if you wouldn't mind, as you each speak, if you do, perhaps just quickly introduce yourself,
Of
just in
course.
case.
Good morning. I'm Jill Katkosin. I'm the principal at Scotland Elementary School. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for having us this morning. I think John's going to put up some slides. Okay, thank you. John, do you mind switching to the next slide for us, please? That's okay. So in reflecting on the many questions that we have been presented over the past few years, we thought that it would be helpful to begin with a bit of history as to how our essential schedule has evolved. As you can see here, we have a little bit of a timeline. So prior to 2019, our schools had a variety of schedules. Some of our schools followed a 5-day essentials rotation. Some of our schools moved to a different version of a 6-day rotation in the 17-18 school year. Some essentials allocations were determined at the building level. So some grade levels had a 30-minute essentials period. Some grade levels had a 35-minute, some had a 40-minute, some had a 45-minute. So really it was dependent on the school. There was not an assured experience for students across the 6 elementary schools. In the 2019-2020 school year, all schools moved to a 6-day rotation. So some of the schools had been on a 6-day rotation in years prior, and the ones that had not been on a 6-day rotation moved to that 6-day rotation. So at that time, the assured experience was that we moved to a 6-day rotation across all 6 schools. Some of the schools had a 40-minute essentials period at that time, and some still had a 45-minute. So again, we had a 6-day rotation across 6 schools, but the timing of that was not the same. It was not consistent. So in the 2021 school year, we continue to move towards that assured experience for students. And at that time, we moved to a 45-minute essentials class across all 6 schools, across all 6 grade levels. So just a little context of history, of the history of it. In the summer of 21 and 22, our art curriculum developed. We aligned to our visual arts framework. And we wanted to make sure that our students had that assured experience. So not only were we making sure that we had the same amount of minutes and the same amount of classes in a 6-day rotation, but making sure that students were learning the same standards across all 6 schools. We are going to continue moving to developing our art curriculum. We have a K-12 collaboration and alignment and integration with our library media curriculum. So when we're asked if we had more art, when we had more art teachers, for some schools we did, and for some schools we didn't, because as you can see, some schools, we had a 30-minute art period in our younger grades. In one of our schools, we had a 30-minute art period on a 5-day rotation. And then we moved to a 6-day rotation where we still had fewer art minutes. So again, it's hard to answer that question to say that we had more art. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it's hard to say that we lost X number of minutes because that number of minutes was different across every school. We did not have the same number of minutes for all essentials. That's not exclusive to art. That was really across the schools. It was different for every grade level. It was different for every one of our essentials.
You could flip to the next slide. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to continue to provide a bit of history here. Particularly, I know sometimes this conversation is intertwined with the shift towards a 6-day schedule. So I'm going to continue with a bit of history here, some of it a bit repetitive. So it was, as referenced in the chart before when Jill went through it, schedules were inconsistent from elementary school to elementary school, which, I know it's stating the obvious, doesn't make for sort of a district student experience. So here the slide represents Branchville at a time when we had a 5-day schedule. At that moment in time, we actually had 19 sections, bigger than we are now, and 40-minute blocks for art. I do want to caution, right, and say that doesn't mean that another school across town's 15-16 schedule looked like that. Next to it, you have a 19-20 schedule. Scotland, in which they had 40 minutes essentials. With the risk of being really redundant here, if we had the Branchville schedule that year, we'd have 45-minute essentials, just to highlight that there was differences. So in 15-16, Branchville actually had 30 minutes of PE. So there was even inconsistency across essentials for 30 minutes across 5 days. 19-20 schedule, as I said a moment ago, in the Scotland schedule here has 40 minutes. So I do want to highlight another strategy that some schools used. So some schools, even going into, as you approach 19-20, while they may have had a 40-minute essential period, at times, by virtue of sort of creativity in their schedule or their size, they could tack on a few extra minutes to an essentials, sometimes art, sometimes a different area, to create an even longer block. Why were they doing all that? Why were we doing all that? And it was because we wished to have data meetings, MTSS meetings. Then we're often referring to it as SRBIs. So I'm going to dig even a little further so that we all have the context on why make this shift to the 6-day, which often kind of, as I said, kind of gets wound into the conversation about art. So the shift to the 6-day at BES, which, we were one of the first schools to go that way, was actually an incredible partnership between teachers, myself. At that year, I even say I had like little goosebumps as I said this. We studied it for a year, for the on and off for the entire school year. The summer we were going to make that shift. I said, hey, who wants to come in? Like, I'll get you lunch, right? Roll up your sleeves, look at his schedule. It's amazing what lunch does, right? We had well over a dozen teachers who were so interested in making this shift that they just said, yeah, I would like to be part of that. Why were they behind it? What were some of the motivations in going to that 6-day? To be clear, like not about an art reduction or anything like that. It was to create structural consistency and to, one, provide an extension block. That was the primary move here. So the extension block was something, a time in the day that students who receive, special, receive pull-out services, support services, would be the primary time we look to provide that, so that a student who was having a hard time in math wasn't missing math to go get this service, right? They could double dip. So that was a big deal. It wasn't just for that though. Teachers were looking to provide what we now call tier 1, not necessarily at the time, to provide general differentiation support. That was a second motivation. Teachers wanted that. The third, we often phrased it as like voice and choice. We were looking for a part of the day in which students could extend their learning. You're really excited about writing a narrative? You have time to do so. Teachers structure that in a different ways, that extension block. They do today, but that was a great motivation amongst teachers. So at that time, we went to a 6-day. 6-day allowed for an alignment of the essential times, right? In old schedules, you couldn't have grade level meetings consistently because all the grade levels essentials weren't at the same time. When you kind of play it all out, it's really hard to sort of describe without sort of really doing it, sort of in front of you or with you. When you can't capture a whole grade. Grades can't come together when the essentials are not aligned. 6 days did this. So at that time, different, like we said, other schools did different things. We went to a 45-minute essential time. So let me see. We are going to flip, if you don't mind, to the next slide, Jonathan, and we're going to continue with a bit of history on the development around changes to the ART FTE.
So on this slide, this is representative of the Scotland Essential Schedule in 2019, 2020. These schedules were based in a 40-minute essentials block for all of our essentials. This was, again, not consistent for all 6 elementary schools. Some at this point, our elementary schools either had 45-minute essentials or 40-minute essentials. So at this point, we were down to 2 different timeframes, but we were all on a 6-day rotation, again, just to provide a little context. So this was Scotland's 6-day rotation, and we were at 40-minute essential blocks. So in April of 2020, Dr. De Silva came onto our team, and we were in the midst of a shutdown. It was the pandemic. And as a district, we were tasked with a $1 million budgetary reduction to our budget for the 2021 school year. So we, as an elementary team, and that was for our K-12 school budget, Dr. De Silva came to us as a K-12 leadership team, and we needed to find reduction in our budgets. As an elementary team, we came to look at, at the elementary level, we don't have at any level. We don't have what we call extra positions. In our district, we don't have extra positions. We have positions that work directly with students. Our staff that we have support students. They are working directly with students, and that is every individual that's in our building is working directly with students. As we began looking at the individuals that we have in our building, we looked at our essential schedules, which is what you see here. And I'll start with our library media specialist, which is in that bottom left side. Our library media specialists at that time became more critical than ever. They were supporting our students in 6th grade levels. These were students who had never been one-on-one with technology. We were home in a pandemic. They were given Chromebooks. Students K-3 had never had Chromebooks. They had never used technology in a way that they were using it. Our students in grades 4 and 5 had some, some experience with the Chromebooks, but not in the way that they were using Google Classroom, and certainly not for our K-3 learners. So as we knew we were going to be transitioning back into school in a way that we had never been before, we knew that technology integration was going to be more important perhaps than it ever had been in years past. PE, if you look at our PE schedule, that's the top left. PE teaches, again, Scotland is an 18-section school. It has been since I've been here. Our PE teachers teach 6 sections a day, 6 days of the rotation. So their schedule is filled from the time, really start to finish of the day, every day of that 6-day rotation. Our music schedule, our music teachers, bottom right, they have their general music classes that they teach. They also support our band and chorus. So on the times that they don't have general music classes, they're doing band lesson by instrument, and they are also supporting chorus. So they're pulling chorus rehearsal by grade level. And then they're supporting our musical performances. So at different schools, we have different types of performances, but we have a musical in the spring. Most of us have some sort of a musical in the spring, musical performances. They're pulling students in ensemble. So in addition to lessons, they're pulling an entire ensemble for 5th grade band. So there are many things that they're doing that is, you can see that the time slots that they're not teaching general music, that time is filled. You can see the art schedule in addition, and I'm not sure it's on my slide, but not here. For the art schedule, there's one section of Art Leap that was occurring every 6 days. There's also one section of Rise Art that was occurring every 6-day rotation as well. It's not notated up there for some reason, but so those are 2 slots that are in there. It was not in that master schedule, but it is something that the art teachers were doing as well. So please note that. There are other things that they were doing, including school beautification and art show. They're preparing for the art show. There are other things that they were doing in terms of responsibilities as well. But these were all considerations that we were looking at when we needed to make that decision about a budgetary consideration. As a team, when the 6 of us were coming together and looking, we were comparing and compiling schedules. But really our biggest consideration was on the impact of direct contact time with students. That was our consideration. As we said, we don't have positions at the elementary level and really K-12 level that are extra positions that don't impact students directly. So we were trying to make the best decision that we could with the information that we had.
So Jill and I were talking earlier, and I remember that just of all the discussions in which I was sitting in my makeshift office that year and the debates, I remember that conversation quite well, because it was hard. Our decisions had to be made at a time, as Jill outlined, when $1 million had to be, come out of the budget. So in addition to the contact time, as the board chair highlighted at the beginning here, to consider a reduction in art was not a novel idea. With the risk of being redundant, I was 4 superintendents ago, Debbie Lowe, who originally looked at an enrollment cutoff for school. So at that time, I think it was Farmingville, Barlow, VP, the proposal was to have less than 1 full-time. I think they were at 0.9 at that time for each school. After the reduction, it was reinstated to a 1.0, I believe, for sort of morale purposes at the time. So 17-18, Dr. Karen Baldwin, so three superintendents ago, proposed a 0.2 FTE art teacher reduction at all the elementary schools, compiling to a 1.2 overall staff reduction. She believed that this proposal reduction from 1.0 to 0.8 wouldn't reduce the art education curriculum experience, nor would it, prevent art teachers from making personal connections with families, with teachers, with students. That proposal, as you may or may not know, did not pass. So 1819, Dr. Jean Ann Pattyfoot, so 2 superintendents ago, proposed the same reduction in our elementary teachers that Karen Baldwin had the year before. Same reasons it didn't go through. So 1920, it was again recommended a reduction to 3.0. Our teachers for the 2021 school year, because they're for the some of the reasons that were outlined by Jill just a bit ago. So the Board of Ed approved the budget, was passed in April 2020. Schools, as Jill set the scene before, were closed due to COVID. We had to make this big cut, as she highlighted. Library media specialists, the integration of those skills were in our face more than ever. So the following year, it was recommended in reinstating 1 art teacher, and it brings us up to the 4.0 art teachers across the 6 elementary schools that we have today. So hopefully, that the brief sort of presentation there provides a bit of the context for what brought us to the position that we find ourselves in today. I think that wraps up our bit of a short presentation there.
Anything else, or we can jump in?
No, I was going to say, yeah, we're happy to take questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And so I'm just going to open it up to the board. Okay, Rachel.
First of all, thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time this morning. It is valued. Your expertise is valued. And I want you to know that. You answered my question. I just want to go back over it for the community, because we have heard numerous, amount of feedback, and I want to be respectful to our parents and community members. So the question is, where did the hours go when we split from 6 teachers to 3 teachers? So first, when I heard you talking respectfully, I think you need to have an understanding, as you presented today, of where the minutes were different in our schools prior, right? Because we went from a 5-day schedule to that 6-day schedule. And also some schools were giving more to some essentials than others. So it's hard to really put a number then on the amount of minutes that were lost, right? When we went from the 6 to 3. But then when did the extension block come into, was that 2020, the extension block? Please no, 19?
Well, right, it varied. So some schools were already putting it into place, and then some schools weren't.
Okay.
And it piloted, and it didn't often look the same. With the risk of interrupting you, Rachel, it's something we didn't highlight is, so when we created the sixth, so you created a 6-day, originally under a 5-day, you have PE twice, right? You have art once, you have library media once, we have music once, you have 5 days. So now you're expanding to 6-day. So what essential do you put in that 6-day? There are different solutions for different years. So I just want to highlight that. So an original, and again, in partnership at that time with teachers who were absolutely amazing, we thought about like a developmental progression. So we had music, if I memory serves me right, K1 all year, with the idea that 2-3 had art doubled, or year 4-5, because the opportunities in library media specialism, makerspace was getting off the ground at that point to integrate. There's so much overlap, and particularly the units in grade 4 and 5 with research and citation. It was like that's a great progression. So, there was lots of debate, like, is that the model? So a different year, honestly, we shifted at Branchville, different schools at different times, to a trimester rotation. Did you want to?
So at Scotland, the year that Branchville did, K1 had music doubled for the whole year, art doubled for 2-3, and library doubled for 4-5. That one year they had it that way for the whole year. At Scotland that year, we rotated by trimester. So for each trimester, we doubled one of those essentials for a trimester. So every child had a doubled rotating extra essential. So we had, everybody got an extra art for a trimester. Everybody had an extra library media for a trimester, and everybody had an extra music for a trimester. So again, it was a little bit different. The idea at Branchville was that over the course of your 6 years, if that had stayed, you would move through having that extra year of a doubled essential. The idea at Scotland was that throughout the course of that year, you would have the extra trimester of that doubled essential. So again, when we talk about what was lost in terms of hours, it's hard for us to put a number on the loss of time or the difference in time. When we had a reduction in art, it's hard for us to give a numeric loss or change because it wasn't the same. We could probably look at the change in time for each of our schools individually, but it would be different at every school, and it would be different based on the comparison of which year. Scotland went from a 5-day schedule to a 6-day schedule, back to a 5-day schedule all in 1 year, because they piloted going from 5-day to 6-day and decided that's not for us, and back to a 5-day in the same year. And then the next year, to align with our colleagues, back to a 6-day the next year. So it is really hard to say what was the change. And again, it's not to say that there was not a reduction. I would be remiss to say that there was not. I'm not saying that, but it would be very hard to give a numeric change into what that is when there were so many differences between the 6 schools, because based on year to year, that would be different. And based on school to school, that would be different.
And with the risk of carrying on too long here, I want to highlight one of the reasons for the inconsistency, because there were many conversations amongst the principals at the time, vigorous debates on like coming up with a more common district experience. And at some years, we showed a schedule before with Branchville at 19. There were schools with under 18. They had flexibility to be more creative with their essential time. They, like I discussed in brief, a model before where they, you tack on extra minutes once every 6 days to an essential, so you can get a larger MTSS data review team. So it wasn't for just kind of throwing things at a wall that there was such diversity. Sometimes it was by virtue of your size that you could be more creative than another.
Thank you. And then the extension block, I agree. I think it's so important for, MTSS support services for our children, so that they're not always being pulled out of core academic classes. That's really important. A question I have that kind of leads into that, we had a podcast, and I want to thank, Mr. Sadlon, Ms. Johnson, who is just incredible, Mr. McNamara, Wes DeSantis, and just incredible people here. And what they had in the podcast, they talked about the standards for art, and they talked about going from, I had looked it up afterwards. It's really from going from like more product-based to conceptual and artistic literacy, and how we weave that artistic literacy into our classrooms every day and our disciplines. So I was wondering if you could speak about perhaps how we could use our extension block for that artistic literacy. Maybe you already are. Maybe this would be a great way to communicate, to our community on that. I have it, and also, more of how is art being integrated then, or just across the disciplines? Is there an opportunity for an elective at some point?
So if I'm going to back up with your question just a bit, Rachel, because it highlights part of the decision-making at the time outside of student contact. Like, in addition to student contact, what some considerations for the reduction in art. So, music, PE are not sub-essentials that are going to be very easily integrated into an elementary reading, writing, math day, right? I think that goes without, it's stating the obvious. And at least, the practice, it's not the formal instruction in art. So I don't want to suggest that at all. But the skill of visual representation, right, is present in the elementary day, more so than those other essentials. So I bet Linda could give a bunch of examples because she knows the curriculum so in and out. But, what comes to mind is in primary grades when we're writing how-tos, right? And what is that, grade 1? Like we plan across our pages first with illustration, right? In math, all through the grades. How do we say, I bet even some board members can recite this because it's talked about so much. What do we say an answer should be represented in when we're talking about complex word problems? We say pictures, numbers, and words. Again, this isn't to say that is, art, but the skill of visual representation is something that is more present and integrated throughout the day. Makerspace, right, is we do design, right, and they do various iterations of design. It's a lot of that focus, at least initially, depending on the project, it's around design. It's illustrations. It's drawing diagrams. So part of it was not just the contact time, but also that here is a subject area that is found elsewhere. It's found in STEAM activities in Makerspace and the like. So I don't know if
Keith, I'll just add one concrete example for the STEAM, and actually just did a really nice job describing that across the curriculum. You know it better than anyone. I can give you one example of how STEAM is integrated into our science social studies curriculum that we refer to as integrated studies. In first grade, our scientists study light, different sources of light. And we do have a lesson that whether this STEAM lesson is implemented in the classroom or through a collaborative model with our library media specialists, where students are looking at using different types of materials to see how light goes through those materials. And that what they are tasked to make or design, as Keith mentioned, is stained glass art. So using various materials, connecting it to the concepts that they've learned through science about light sources, and then they take what they've learned in art class and pull it all together in creating that piece of art.
So are there potentials to do more with the integration? Yeah, I think so. And you asked, I think, Rachel, about the extension block. Is there potential within the extension block for what further art integration there is? And are there times in which art-like activities have been integrated as, depending on the grade level and the time of year as the students have choice and voice? Are there art-like, activities that happen? There are.
And then, Tina, I just want to go one more and then give other board members a chance. I can come back. So just because it's on the same vein. So, another question that we have received is, if we have reduced our art teachers because of overstaffing, then why don't the numbers also reflect then a reduction with music and library media? I'm going to start the response. But of course I want to hear from you, but I think this is what I've heard from you, is that we can integrate art more throughout our disciplines with artistic literacy, but music and library media, we cannot. And I've also heard, there's orchestra, there's band lessons, and then that comes into play. So that's why, maybe if you could speak to why to music and to library media as opposed to one art class. I think that's a discussion, but I respectfully have heard, and being a teacher, I kind of understand in the classroom how we can integrate art more easily. But if you could just speak to that, that would be great.
So I know Jill referenced before music, our music teachers, as I think most know, but in case you don't, are also our band teachers, right? Which, if you listen to that podcast, is kind of unique and what an incredible experience. So they're teaching band and then they're teaching band lessons, right? And so that makes for a pretty full day. Library media, as Jill outlined when she went through sort of like, where were we in 2020? That was front and center, right? Because of the technology-based integration at the time. And the integration of library media is an ongoing conversation to this day. I believe like where the computer science standards K-12 is something that's currently being worked on by the LMS. And so they're actively looking at, I think, even into this summer, how do we provide for more integration there?
If I could just add on to that. Again, one of the challenges in school systems with the limited amount of number of minutes that we have per day, that's a hard stop, is looking at all the standards that we are required to implement across all the different content areas and then make determination about how many minutes, and this is for literacy too, do our teachers need each day to be able to implement those standards so that at the end of the year, our students can be ready to move forward and can find success. So one of the things that we're working on now, which is another big ask, is the computer science standards K-12. And I know how important that is to our community. And I know that people who have been listening have heard about the addition of courses at the high school. That is a pathway that is important in the world and important to our community. So we are actually behind in implementing those K-12 computer science standards. Some of the new lessons in the Library Media Center that were designed over the past summer around digital citizenship do hit those points. So we take all the different standards that we need to integrate and we look across them and see if certain experiences and lessons and content might be able to cover more than one. But that is a big job in front of us, as is the work around STEAM, really making sure that we're bringing in that art element to STEM, which is already happening in many places, but we want to make sure, again, it's happening in an equitable way and not an all about way. So not only, just to add in to think about LMS, they are our on-site tech person. They do tech support for 400 Chromebooks or however many Chromebooks, each kid's Chromebook. They're the first line of defense. And the ViewSonics in the classroom, which every teacher has. Thank goodness, we're so lucky to have that. And then they really are carrying multiple standards that they need to implement. So that occasional doubling up is quite full.
So if you don't mind, I want to pick up on an idea that Corey said there. And, she talked about, right, I'm going to sort of take what her comment and add to it, because the elementary day is limited.
Which slide is that?
Yeah, we're going to pull up, if we could, slide 6.
Okay.
To talk about the overall elementary day. So we have context of essentials alongside the other demands in curriculum.
Are these the DIRG A instructional minutes too? Okay.
What they have to work with in their whole.
Yeah, slide 6.
Everyone's question.
Right.
This is different.
It is a special Tetris.
Good morning, everyone. I met you, I believe, but I'm Nancy Karen, the principal at Farmingville. So I am going to just walk you kind of through this, and I know you can see it up there, but as elementary schools, we have 410 minutes to our day from start to finish. And as you can see, a big chunk of that gets used up automatically. So we take away 60 minutes for lunch and recess. We take away 45 minutes for essentials. We use 35 minutes a day for our extension block and 15 minutes for SEL. When you take all of those pieces out of the equation, we're left with about 255 minutes. And with those 255 minutes, we need to cover math, reading, writing, foundational literacy skills, as well as integrated studies, which Keith had mentioned is what we call social studies and science instruction. So I want to say, I think for my team, like we value so much art. We value all of the essentials and our teachers. We really do value them. And we have very limited time to fit in everything that we need to fit in. And so we try very hard. We look at this every spring together. We've had lots of heated discussions about how do we balance and how do we prioritize and figure out what is going to be best for our students. And we would love more minutes to do everything, and unfortunately don't have them. So I hope this helps provide just a little context for our day, what our day looks like, and what our
Not in
kids-
this order.
No, not in this order. Not in this order, for sure. We tried to separate it out so you could see like the non-negotiables. What do we immediately have to make sure is in our schedule? And then how do we fit the rest in?
So John, if you can share the document I just shared with you. So one of the things that we did recently, because we discovered that a document we had was a bit outdated, was we talked with our other,
We put it on slide 10.
I know, I want to use the big one.
Oh, you got it.
But then we can go to your 10 too. What we did was we talked to our DERG partners to see where they were in terms of minutes and how they were using the minutes across their day. It's a fascinating conversation. One of the things that struck me right away, which seems small, but it's big, is in this district, how much we value recess and lunchtime. So when you compare us to our neighbors, we provide 60 minutes for our students to have lunch recess. In many districts, that's more of a 40-minute time frame.
John, you
Can
may
I
have to
add on
switch
to that?
it's hard to see it all. We should have gone with the smaller one. Courtney.
Yeah.
Sorry, but it made the font so small.
So in addition to the lunch recess, I think a few things that I noted when I looked at it that stood out to me is one, the extension block is not built into the core academic time, which is not consistent with what you see in other districts. We have a distinct separate extension block from core instruction. And I think that's really a feather in our cap, frankly. And it's longer at 35 minutes than you're going to see across any other district in the DERG. In addition to that, you guys aren't giving yourself enough credit with 15 minutes in the SEL block, because in a lot of grade levels, that's up to 25. And we have a distinct separate SEL block. So, if we're looking at the whole child, and I would caution minutes relating to what we value. But if we look at the whole child, the combination of a longer lunch and recess, a distinct SEL block, a separate and longer extension block, those three things alone really kind of honor the fact that kids need to have breaks. They need to have opportunities for connection with adults and with each other. And so looking at, I appreciate the analysis across essentials, because it's a question that's being asked, so we should answer it. But to look at any of those one things by themselves is just really not doing justice to what a child's experience is like, how they go through their day, rather than just nitpicking at individual minutes but thinking about what makes sense in the larger picture.
But I just would add to that if I can, because I've always said we need to caution ourselves in comparisons, because what you'll notice, as Dr. Hanaway said, you're in Ms. Gillette, some schools have, in fact, I think some school districts raised their lunch and recess recently, because some of these were at 40 minutes, where we have 60, some are at 50. Some school districts have world language, okay, well, we're the only ones. But most school districts have world language. We do not. Some school districts have less music. Some school districts have less PE. So we could debate this with any population of parents. So ultimately, and by the way, and all of these have recommended minutes. And if we were to take every single content area's recommended minutes, the school day would be probably 8 to 8, right? And most of us wouldn't mind that, because we love our kids, but I think their families want them home at some point. And the reality is, the reality is we do have a responsibility, just as that chart that Nancy shared, to look at those instructional minutes and then identify at this moment in time where we believe we need to schedule it. Again, you can look across here. You're going to see that in some districts, there's school districts that have music for once a week for 40 minutes. We have it more. Other school districts have less PE than us. New Canaan, for example, they have 2 30-minute blocks where we have more. So there's always going to be that, I don't want to say debate, but there's always going to be that discussion, right? What should we have? What should we not have? Should we move this? Should we move that? And so that's, where I think I started, is I trust our principals that they're making the right decisions for their students, their families, their community at this moment in time. I'm assuming there was another
Yes.
district reference.
Is that okay? Can we move on? Because I know there are questions.
Hi, thank you for your presentations. I want to be clear and say that I did really want to hear from the art teachers, but I was told because of union rules, they could not be here today. I don't hear them represented in your presentations, and that very much concerns me. We have 4 teachers. One teacher has 528 students. The second teacher has 458 students. The third teacher has 456 students. And the fourth teacher has 498 students. I cannot imagine trying to teach art in a comprehensive way with that many students. The recommendation is 300 to 400 students per teacher. That is so many students. Now, I understand that you are trying to be equitable, but in being equitable, you cut art rather than trying to improve the situation. I'm not sure, why that decision was made. It seems like you would have tried to enhance the experience rather than limit the experience. I really would like to hear what your art teachers are saying, if you could speak to that, because I feel like, I went and I looked at 2016, 2017 school year, and I looked at the head count for administration. We're spending a lot of money on administration, and yet we cut art teachers to balance a budget. Or to save money. That seems just so short-sighted to me. And I feel like the community is saying the same thing. I mean, we are getting a lot of letters. We could actually put back 1.75. We could put 0.75 teacher back in Veterans Park. I understand. I think there's like 263, students there. So I understand that that's not as many students as like a Scotland. So what the community is asking for is it's understandable. They want the same experience that my kids got at Scotland. I think we talked about that. I mean, it was amazing, and it's not the same experience. So
Can I actually speak to the question, both questions and then
yes,
anybody else?
and I
but-
actually have a question for you too. It's on my notes. So go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. So when we did the analysis that went from when we were at 3 and we did a hard study, it was a combination of a lot of factors. But one of the things that was really important to us was our employees, and we did not want to create partials at every school. We wanted 1.0 art teachers. So what we could have done, which we presented to the board in February 2021, we opted not to do, was a 0.6 at Veterans Park and a 0.7 at Farmingville and a 0.8 at the other schools. We had serious concerns about recruiting and maintaining high quality educators who didn't have full-time jobs. So that was a really big motivator for us. And I think at that time, it was absolutely the right decision because we wanted to make sure that, we could recruit people for the positions. It's very difficult to recruit for partial positions. And folks at the secondary level are probably saying, yeah, we know, because we have that all across. And frankly, I have it across special services as well. So I just wanted to speak to that point in terms of why are they traveling schools? It's because otherwise, with the provision that each school requires, in addition to because they have their contact time, their lunch, the prep, the material management time, and then in each school, they have time on top of those others. So if you look at, I don't know if we have current schedules, but if you look
Yeah,
at current
it's-
schedules.
And I was just gonna, sorry to interrupt, but slide 7, I was gonna ask that we
Yeah.
can present the current art schedule.
If you look at current schedules, they have time on top of material management every day, lunch and prep. So we didn't want to split, we didn't want partial. So that's why the travel. So I'm not going to speak for Linda and the principals and Corey about, the processes for feedback, but feedback is very much a part of the normal professional development and program development process. There's been a lot of feedback. And I think the feedback probably has been in a few main categories, which is Art Leap, Rise Art, setup, breakdown time, matting, hanging, art shows. That's been the consistent themes. I would caution the difference between feedback and preference. Across the 4 art teachers, they have different preferences that they would like for their position within their jobs. And that's where inequity comes in. Speaking to what Jill was talking about, principals had different preferences. So you had a 30-minute, you had a 40-minute, you had a 45-minute. And I do believe a core foundational thing that public school districts have to provide to a community is equity in the experience across schools. It shouldn't be that you live on one side of the town, so you get this, and you happen to live on another side of town and you get that. So it's a balance, but I don't know if you
I
want
just
to.
want to add one piece
Yeah.
about the art teachers in terms of their feedback. And I think you're right. There are very natural structures that we have in place for all teachers in terms of giving that feedback on their curriculum, on the program. when it comes to the lens of a teacher outside of that, right? Part of their contractual negotiations, their working conditions, we have a different lens. We have to look at all of our teachers as part of a school district and organization. We cannot just make decisions for small groups. If we were to do that, everybody would have their pick and choose of what they want. We wouldn't be able to function as a district. That's just the reality. And so for as much as we do collect feedback, we do, that's important part of our work. We have to remember what that feedback is focused on and what it can't be focused on, because that is a reality of working with many teachers have a very different point of view of what their work, what their conditions would be if they got to pick. But that's just not something that an organization this size can do. It's just not a reality. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I can actually go in and we can look at the art schedules together. I just want to preface my comments by saying that I have a background in art. Nobody cares about art more than I do. By the way, I'm Becky Loss, the principal of Barlow Mountain. Prior to becoming a teacher, I worked as an artist. I worked in a museum. I have a degree in art history. So I set off as a young adult and college student to make art my life. And as I became an elementary school teacher, while I had a certification in art and elementary school, I really saw it as my calling to be an elementary teacher once I had gotten involved in that. So, I think that I have the perspective, or I may share the perspective of some of our art teachers, and I can value the amount of time that goes into not only materials management, but the creative process and the work that you do to collaborate with your peers and your colleagues. But the advantage, or, a different perspective that I have as an elementary principal now is to see exactly what we're talking about. When we looked at the slide Nancy presented, is there's a lot of important things that we have to do. And, I value my time as a child and the experience that I had in art. But I also didn't need digital citizenship. I also didn't need the same social and emotional learning that we're receiving at this moment in time. So, I just wanted to preface with my perspective before I show this. So this is the current schedule for 4 of our elementary schools. We just wanted to give it as a sample. So you can see, as you can see from the left side, that's Farmingville and Ridgeberry. So something I would point out is that our teachers are in one school all day long. They're not traveling in the middle of the day. Well, yes, they are traveling between schools. And they do have consecutive days in each of the schools where they are. So currently, every student in Ridgefield Public Schools has 45 minutes of art once per 6-day cycle. Our RISE students have access to art, as you can see on the right at our Barlow Mountain schedule, and our 4th and 5th grade students have Art Leap as an elective. So everything in white is contact time with students. Everything in green is not contact time with students. And so just like Liz was speaking to, that's a busy time for our art teachers. I think something, if I wanted to share their perspective or something that I've heard, is that's a very busy time for them. And I think they would want to share that there's a lot going on there. There's materials management, which is huge for any artist. There are lesson planning, building beautification, which includes matting art and hanging art, collaborating with their peers. So, it's, however, right. So I just wanted to show that balance. When you look back at the 1920 schedule, it does show how, and that's actually on slide 3. When there were 2 sections, I'm sorry. So when there was 1 grade, or actually you can see from Scotland, there are 2 grades that year, or in this trimester that we're looking at. that had to, that were getting to arts per 6-day cycle. And, you know, I don't have the actual minutes parceled out because it's a little bit different, but their planning time that's in green, or that materials management time, we felt like was comparable.
Can I ask my other question?
Yeah, and they were getting 40 minutes then. Yeah. Yeah.
So I appreciate what you said about children needing, you know, digital citizenship, but I have noticed, because I'm just an avid news watcher, and we think these children need so much, but if you read the news, they're not happier. They're not happier. Children are committing suicide at a much higher rate at 10. So I think we need to be careful thinking that kids need so much. We have kindergartners now, they get 40 minutes of art in a 6-day cycle, which means they miss it some weeks. We have like a militant school district. So I think we need to think about that sometimes when we think like what we think kids need. They certainly don't need more technology in kindergarten. So we need to be careful about that. And I appreciate your perspective as an artist. I really do, because I can tell that you really do care about your teachers. So
Slide 2, please.
my question to you is, and I've got 2 actually, but when you cut the teachers to 4, the instructional minutes from art were allocated across the library and PE. So now instructional time is not equitable across essentials, with art time dramatically lower than other essentials. At the time of the cut to 4, the administration promised a ground-up assessment of essentials to include a rebuilding of the art program. That was in your February 2021 presentation. The slide that says the 4-teacher model provides an initial step while allowing room for further analysis and potential enhancements in the future as part of a comprehensive elementary specials essentials process. Nothing has changed. Since the cuts each year, there are petitions, emails, letters, and public comments calling attention to this inequity. Where do you stand with the analysis you promised? And do you believe a 4-year of substandard art is appropriate?
So I just want to clarify, we increased to 4. I didn't cut to 4. I increased from 3 to 4. So I feel based on my, and again, I don't oversee the art program. I am lucky enough to have been part of that analysis and to be alongside my colleagues. I think we should feel proud of our elementary art program. We have developed curriculum over the last 2 summers. Curriculum was not consistent when we had full-time art teachers in the building. So again, coming back to equity as a foundational principle of a public institution and organization, kids are having equity of their experience of curriculum and content. So that's one piece that I think we should be proud of. That is an enhancement from February 2021. Second enhancement from February 2021 is professional development. There has been a much stronger professional development, not just at the elementary level, but actually at the K-12 level. And I'm speaking to things that Linda can speak to much better. So I'm going to ask you to weigh in after I'm done. So professional development being a second. And then the third component is the collaboration with the community, which was not a consistent. We are an arts town. We have museums in town. We did not have regular partnerships with our museums down the block from us across all 6 schools. Linda can clarify. We did not through our art program formally. So I see those 3 as very clear enhancements to our program. And you know, I think it's, as I said earlier, I think it's only part of the conversation in the picture to equate minutes to value.
We did have a relationship with the Aldridge.
I can just add on to some of the feedback as it connects to curriculum and partnerships within the community. When I came on board, I started to work with our art teachers, either formally or informally. I've worked with them now for 2 summers in terms of curriculum development and reestablishing community relationships. When developing those project plans, I asked for feedback from our art teachers. What would you like to work on in terms of developing our curriculum? I will say that I think we have top-notch, high-quality art teachers, and they are delivering outstanding curriculum and instruction to our students. They implement, integrate, sell within their art studios, and they do have an understanding of other content areas that we're teaching. And when it makes sense, they integrate that curriculum within their art block as well. Voice of our art teachers. I've asked them, what did you do in the past? What relationships within the community or outside of the Ridgefield community did we have in the past? Amazing what our art teachers have done pre-pandemic. So this again is post-pandemic, came on board, sort of got a status of where they're at in terms of relationships with the community and again, outside of the community. And we prioritized. I asked the art teachers where they would like to reestablish a relationship, and their voice spoke to the Aldrich. So we have reestablished that relationship with the Aldrich Museum. We have professional learning with them. If it's not K-12, it's specific to K-5. We also have, our teachers have opportunities to attend events that the Aldrich hosts either on the weekends or evenings. And this year we are reestablishing the opportunity for third graders to visit the museum. If that is something, the teachers, collaboration between classroom teacher, art teacher, and administrators at each building, if they'd like to go to the museum as well. I'll give you one example of the curriculum development. Again, a choice from the teachers. Last summer, they chose to work on our ceramics unit. There's been some questions around time with the kiln, materials management. So they intentionally chose that unit to relook at our learning standards, outcomes at each grade level, what's developmentally appropriate, and then also looking at common assessments for that one unit, whether it's a rubric, student observations on how we assess student learning.
Here to speak for themselves. So how much time do they have to give these programs? And it sounds wonderful. But when you're one teacher with 528 kids, how much time do you have to give to these programs? Because we're loath to give, time to art, right? So these programs sound wonderful, but how much time do they have? Because there's 520 children and 28, and I'm thinking, some of these kids have special needs, right? I know my own daughter, she had absence seizures. Had she had 40 minutes every 6 days, her teacher happened to be Jen Zier, she never would have had the time to notice that Cassidy was blanking out for term, because her seizures look just like you're zoning out for a minute. She wouldn't have had the time. So that concerns me also. And just as an FYI, my daughter, she personally said, I feel like sometimes special ed kids are scapegoats for this district. Because we keep saying, oh, well, we don't want to, we don't want to go into extension block because, special ed kids. So she needed the extra art. And I feel like a lot of special ed kids need extra creative time. And we just gloss over that.
So I think this answers part of your question around how much time. So we put up a slide here that speaks to the 6-day rotation, the number of minutes available in the day, and the percentage of time that our teachers are spending teaching. So you see the A day there. I cannot, good Lord, I can't see. Yeah, sorry. A day, they teach 32% of the time, B day 62, E day, yeah, this is current. E day 54%, F day 54%, C day 68%, D day 54%. So that's just to your question of how much time.
Just on the IEPs, we have obligations by law, and what is written in that IEP is what we are required to follow. And so the question of a student with an IEP being a scapegoat, they could possibly be pulled during that block of time. I always want to call it extension block. But the reality is they are pulled during different parts of their day because it really depends on their IEP goals and objectives and what is written in that PPT that is best for that student. The other piece that we always have to remember is that it is our obligation in the law in which we provide support for students who may be struggling by way of MTSS. And so that means that we're not supplanting, but we're supplementing. So to pull a student who's struggling with reading out of reading is supplanting. To pull a student out of math who's struggling with math is supplanting. So we look at alternative times, which the extension block helps. It's not perfect because students who may be receiving services across both areas may need to be pulled out of one of those blocks. We try very hard not to pull them out of access points, which might be an essential or possibly a integrated studies, science or social studies, where they might have access they may not have in an academic area. And that is really why the essential, that block of time, the extension block came in and was called something else where I came from, but that's why they put it into place, because they needed that extra time. And so, yes, I think this is one representation of the contact time that our current teachers, our teachers have in these two particular schools, and it follows a similar model. And certainly we can show you what a classroom teacher's contact time, which is much higher than this one.
Thank you. I know Liz had a question. So Liz.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments and then a question. So my first comment is thank you to each of the principals who live this day to day with our students. They live this schedule. They live with the after effects of a pandemic that has directly and detrimentally managed to impact each of our children. So thank you for taking the time out of your day this morning away from those students to talk about this topic. I know there are a lot of parents, or at least a group of parents, who are very concerned about particularly the visual arts component. But I want to remind everyone in the community that visual and performing arts is all creative. And we seem to be forgetting that this administration has developed a role to manage our VPA. Dr. McNamara, Mr. McNamara has taken that role over the course of the last couple of years and really started to create that equity and consistency across our groups. We relocated to this district, and I was shocked to find out that our elementary schools did not have the same programming. It depended on where your house was, and I want to reiterate that some kids were getting very different experiences across the board. And over the last few years that I've been on this board, Dr. De Silva and her team of leaders that's sitting in the room right now has worked very, very hard to create equitable experiences across Ridgefield so that when those kids matriculate up through that system, they have a consistent experience. How dare us not do that? So that for me is just, I want to thank you. I know that this district values the arts, and to suggest that, whether it's on social media or in this room, to suggest that this group of people does not have the experience or the care about our students and their experience is irresponsible. It's in it, and frankly, it's a bit offensive, because I believe that each of the people that we've hired within the Ridgefield district care very deeply about the experiences and outcomes of our students. So that's my first thing. And for anyone in this room to suggest that there is a correlation between elementary art hours for visual tactical arts to suicide at the elementary level is irresponsible and really doesn't comprehend what suicide and mental health is all about. So I apologize for that comment coming out of this board, because I think it's absolutely irresponsible to suggest that. We all value our students' experiences here, and art is just one of the experiences that Ridgefield Public Schools offers our kids in the VPA realm. We've added classes at the high school level that kids are excited about, with digital arts, with product design, with integrated art, so that they have experience of those with differing learning abilities. To suggest that every elementary student loves art and is dying without it, everyone's using an N of 1 for their own student. I'll share mine. I have 2 children that went through part of elementary and middle school in the Ridgefield Public Schools, and neither one of them wanted to pursue art. They didn't enjoy that class. In fact, it caused them stress. One of them is an avid painter. It wasn't interested, right? So if we all use our N of 1, we're going to have different experiences. But this administration needs to look at the whole student and the whole student body and create equity across that. So that's my statement. I just want to put it out there. The question I have for the administration or the principals is, if you were to create more art at every school, regardless of the number of students involved, you had a full-time teacher, where would you take those minutes out of? Which class?
I can start that conversation. I could, or Dr. Dislova, did you want to jump in there?
No, I think one of the principals or you, Linda, I think we
So,
have that
that is something that our team comes together each spring. We look at the master schedule, in the master schedules across the schools. We look at our early schools, we look at our late schools. We look at the instructional minutes that are needed to teach our content areas after, as described earlier, we back out lunch, recess, the essentials.
Other state mandates, I assume, Dr. Johnson?
We do look at recommended times that come out of advisory boards. And yes, there are advisory boards for art, for the content areas, saying the amount of instructional minutes that are recommended for effects on our readers, our writers, our students who go to PE class. And then from there, we look at the content, we look at what we're teaching our students, we look at our instructional models. So if we were to add more time to our 45-minute art essentials block, we would need to revisit the time that we're devoting to early literacy, for example, foundational skills. We might need to look at math. Do we need to, pull time out of our math block? And then how that might affect our students' learning in those areas. And as we've mentioned earlier, it could be difficult to look at a math curriculum or early literacy and integrate that into that additional time that we would put into mathematics. So it would come from a content area. It's not necessarily, lunch recess or that extension block, but we would lose time in one of our major content areas.
I think it might be helpful if we pull up slide 9, because one thing that we've alluded to, but we haven't actually looked at, is the day in the life of an elementary school student. And I think that slide 9 reflects a classroom teacher's schedule of the day, which obviously will show us this just, for example, is a third grader's 6-day cycle in our elementary schools. So I know our fonts here are a little bit small, but before we looked at, Susie commented, like, obviously that was not in order. Now you can see what they are getting in order. So a student arrives at school, they have a morning meeting and some sort of social and emotional learning and interaction, which we believe is very important. For this third grade class in particular, they're beginning and ending their day with literacy. We have our intervention extension, which I just wanted to add a note there. That's 35 minutes because we found that 30 minutes wasn't enough. We wanted our kids to be able to transition and be able to get a full experience in a systematic program if they were being provided with scientifically research-based interventions. They have their lunch, they have their recess, they have an essential, and they have math. So children are human beings. I would also add that. So what this schedule doesn't take into consideration are transitions. It's the time that it takes them to get from the cafeteria to their classroom, to get from their classroom to the gymnasium, to get from the gymnasium back. They need, to use the bathroom. They need move, right? Like, they're little, so they need movement breaks throughout the day. They might need time to take a break and have a snack. So while it looks beautiful on this grid here, our kids are little humans and they need time. And so I think to ask us the question, what would we pull it from, is very, very challenging for us, because everything in this day is essential for their development.
Becky, I just want to make sure we get to the questions. And
Sure.
I know there's a
Is
few
that
more
okay? Sorry,
before.
he had his hand and then Rachel and then you. Is that okay? Okay.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Becky.
Sorry, Liz, are you done? I'm so sorry. Liz, you're done?
Yes, thank you very much for that answer. I think at least I, as a board member, believe that reading and math are one of our, probably our primary core goals as an education community. So thank you for that.
Sean, then Rachel, and then Selena.
Okay, yeah, first of all, thank you all. That's a lot of information all at once, which is great, but again, we're comparing apples to oranges here. It's difficult to do. The equity thing, Liz already covered in great detail, but that was important to me because we have parents who are yelling about playgrounds that don't look the same in different schools, and yet the curriculum was wildly different across them. In terms of equity, how does our program look going from the middle school, from elementary to middle school? Are we still solid there? Again, thank you for the curriculum work across the board we've done. It's huge. But I look back to my experience when I went to school, we had things that fit into the day like typewriting. I mean, we had, there was a thread online today about a couple of kids that visited an auto shop. They're very interested in that.
Right.
I went to Darien High School a lifetime ago. We had auto shop, small repair, engine repair. We had wood shop, we had metal shop. All these things have vanished from what we do. Yet all these things are pathways that are, a career eventually.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I can take that one. So we've been doing a lot of work on pathways. One of the things that we looked at when we looked at the existing programming here in Ridgefield was pathways for visual artists as they moved through elementary school and into middle school. And that really is where Art Leap is, because we see Art Leap as equivalent to a student who picks an instrument and who becomes very passionate. And, some of our kids get to do both, actually, because we're providing that during non-instructional time. So anybody has the opportunity to go to Art Leap if they want that. So we see that Art Leap in grades 4 and 5 as an additional pathway that we didn't used to have for students who are really interested in the visual arts. Currently, the middle school team and some high school teachers are a part of a middle school pathway study where we're really looking at the minutes, the hours, the voice and choice, and VPA and the arts are a big part of that conversation. And we're looking for ways both during the school day and outside of the school day actually to be creative, because like you've heard from our principals, we do have standards that we need to implement. And we, as you've heard from our ELA department, we had some big curricular adjustments, and actually in mathematics too, in middle school, that are essential that we get right for our students. That is our job. That is our obligation as well. So that middle school work is currently ongoing. And as I think Liz alluded to earlier, Liz Flogel, the work at the high school is very evident, and having Mike McNamara as a lead along with Linda and along with me in the work K-12, the potential and what we've already realized, nobody has spoken yet about chorus and the growth that we're seeing in chorus and the incredible talent that we have brought into our district. And I don't know if anyone was at the middle school concert where all the middle schoolers from both schools got up on stage with the high school students. So that's another pathway that we're looking to develop. So in general, pathway work is our job because all of these standards are K-12. So we have to make sure that they align and make sense and grow for students across those grade levels. And for VPA, obviously, that's been a big priority for us. It's been on our district priorities, and we've spoken about it many times.
Thank you. I know I said, but I know Tom has to leave. So Tom, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I have to leave at 9:30, so
Sorry.
I don't want to be rude when I walk out. But my question is, well, first of all, I can't imagine how much time and effort it took to put this presentation together. I suspect on short notice when you have other things to do. So thank you for doing that. I have a bunch of questions, but I don't have time to ask them because I need to get somewhere. So I'll ask this one. So my understanding is the budget cut, the $1 million budget cut that was referenced a couple of years ago, that sort of precipitated this. If there had not been that request for such a significant budget cut, would the art program have been touched at all?
Want me to take it or you want to? Go ahead. Go ahead. I can't speak at the building level. I think I'm the only person from the central office leadership level, aside from Karen, who was here. So I can give you my impression of that answer. I can't speak specifically for Dr. Padfoot at the time. So the conversation that I listened to was Karen Baldwin had presented a 1.2 cut. It didn't pass. Following year, Jean Ann Padfoot presented a 1.2 cut, didn't pass. So that year, as Jean Ann was back for a second time here, developing the budget, she saw 2 years of the same proposal not passing in the community.
And this is, remember, the pandemic hadn't actually hit yet. And Karen, you can weigh in. The conversation that I listened to was that she felt, based on watching that over the last 2 years, that she was not comfortable. She didn't think that the conversation had really adjusted or changed at the board level or at the community level, that she didn't bring the cut forward. It was discussed, but because the 2 year of the identical proposal having been proposed by the superintendent and then asked to reinstate by the board in both situations, it wasn't just a discussion. It was built in the superintendent's proposal and then told, I think I'm not a superintendent and I will not be, but if you're told twice by your board 2 years in a row to reinstate the same thing, I think that she paid attention to that. But Karen, I don't know if you would add more to it.
No, I think Liz captured that very well. I just want to give another perspective as Becky gave hers. I have been in this district for 26 years. I worked at Scotland and I was a Scotland parent as well too, prior to coming to administration. Back under Deborah Lowe, we did look at the essentials. This was part of the history, at which time we knew that we had, less time with students in the essentials, where there were areas where we could make reductions that would not impact students. Every time you're here at a budget reduction, I think everyone has heard, we do everything possible to limit contact time with students. And so all of the conversations that have gone on now for over 10 years is about the amount of contact time that our art teachers have at elementary. And so, yes, to Liz's point, when pressure comes, and everybody knows when you get parent complaints and emails like this, it is challenging. And so as a superintendent, that conversation when, as you said, Dr. Patty Foote and Dr. Baldwin were told, don't make those reductions because of the pressure, it didn't happen. And under this administration right now, when we did have, and previous ones, when we had that cut, we had to go back and do what we thought was best. And we thought it was best that this reduction, although there were some minutes changed, as you heard from Jill Catbosin, it varied across the district. We believed that this was an appropriate reduction that still allowed our students to receive what they needed.
Just to add to that, Karen, there's the fiscal responsibility part of it, which is what you raised, Tom. But there's also, when you go back to that slide that the elementary principal shared with the contact time that our current art teachers have with students, which is less, but yet they have there's availability within the schedule. And when we asked our principals, okay, you still have, with the 4.0, even as it stands, there is availability within the schedule to add more time, theoretically, right? With the same staffing. So it's not about budget. Take the budget part out of it. Because at the end of the day, our work is about kids first. And then we work on a budget. What do our kids need? So if you go back to my presentation to the board, it's always what our students need first. What is the mission? What is that vision of the graduate? And then work backwards from there. That said, when I asked our principals, we have some time here. Where would you like to, they couldn't answer that question because it went back to what Linda Johnson and the principal said earlier. Everything in the schedule is needed at this moment in time. And so budget number aside, I think what our principal shared earlier is what they would say again, is they would have to really think thoughtfully about where they're going to get that time and what students would be missing. And what we also knew and learned, one of the things that I learned, again, as my colleague shared, I don't even think I had stepped foot in the district physically until that summer. But one of the things that I did learn was from our middle school principals is that the experience that students were getting when they transitioned to middle school varied. It was different. And some kids were getting to some things and other kids were not. And so that was another piece of the information that's really important, because do we want our students to miss blank in our elementary program? Perhaps we can add a little bit of time here or there to add a little bit to the certain units of study if that's what we feel like we need. And that's the feedback. And to your question, Selena, about how do our teachers give feedback? If there is a certain unit where they say, it's hard to get to everything here, could we increase time in that particular unit? That would be something that the principal should be looking at, and they still can with the amount of teachers that they have, because even still with the 4.0, we are able to meet our students for the contact time that they've allotted. In fact, the 3.0 they could, but then we added the other programs again to add that pathway. And so there's a fiscal responsibility when you know that you can staff for the entire district, right? Based on the enrollment that you have. And I think that's why you've heard this from superintendent after superintendent after superintendent. If the elementary principals had come and said, Dr. De Silva, we need this. This has to be in our budget. I could assure you, the Board of Education can say, no, that's your job. But I would be recommending it because that's my job. My job is to look at the whole picture and hear from my principals. And they're strong advocates. I can trust me. I go into a meeting, I say no, I leave the meeting, I say, now I understand. So if that is something, and they can attest to that. And I'll go into the meeting saying absolutely no, because I'm looking at that budget. And when they recommend something, we listen, we hear, because we listen to understand. And these are the people that are with our children every single day. And by the way, they care. This isn't about this, they care. You can feel that from each one of them. And so we just can't lose that piece.
John, do you want to follow up if you have time?
A quick one if I
Sure,
can.
absolutely.
Because obviously it makes sense, what everyone's saying, you can't cut out math. I mean, it's common sense, right? But some have suggested that you could equalize some of the essentials. I think I used to call them specials when I was in school.
Me too.
But so you take art, music, library media, and equalize those three and don't mess with all the other content areas. What's your view of that?
Want to bring it back to what we talked about the other day in standards? Any one of you can take it.
Sorry, I guess that's, that's a really hard question, and I'll start, and maybe my, colleagues can respond as well. Yeah, I thank you, Susie. I think it does come back to curriculum and standards, right? It's, you kind of look, even math, right? We start and we say, what do we need to accomplish? What is the state standards? What does the Ridgefield experience need to be like? Then you build out from there. What can you accomplish it in the time that is available? We heard from Linda a bit ago about the work that's being done in that area in art. I heard Dr. De Silva talk a little bit about the flexibility that in conversation, at least, that if there is a unit, right, that we're not getting everything to, well, it is a feedback loop. That's a feedback loop that exists outside of art. So as we highlighted in this sort of history here, right, the importance of library, media, makerspace, technology integration, like that just rushed to the forefront, right? That was like in your, literally in the screen in front of your face. And that, and that's what was so important, I think, about setting that context, that you can see how that decision was made to say, yeah, but at this time and space, we need library media, we need makerspace, and there's more potential to be doing there. This feels a little bit like picking my favorite child.
I know which my favorite is.
Because
That's right.
Because as we are, as that
take it
question
back.
is set
I don't
up
mean
to position art versus music versus library media, we could all sort of probably have that same debate around writing versus math. Do I want more art? I want more art. I want more math. I want more extension block. I want more SEO time.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
I also just would like to say that, as I mentioned earlier, something we are constantly doing is reevaluating, reflecting, looking at what our kids need. This is the first year, since I've been here, since many of us have been here, that we're not dealing with as many complications from the pandemic. So, as we do every year, we are going to sit as a team. We spend a lot of time together over the summer, and we are going to reflect. How can we think outside of the box? How can we figure out a way as Dr. De Silva said, perhaps in a particular unit to give extra time when we need extra time. And we do have good relationships with our art teachers and value them and listen to their feedback. And we want their input on how we can look outside of the box to really make sure our kids are getting what they need. So I don't want anybody to think that we are not thinking about this. It is constantly something that we're thinking about, not just in art, in every area. But now we've had 2 years of having 4 art teachers. We finally are not dealing with the pandemic. And it's a good time to take a step back and really think about how things have gone this year and what needs to be adjusted.
Can I just say one thing? When I look at all of you and I think about my colleagues and this team and the wonderful teachers that we have in our buildings, I just have to say I take personal and organizational offense at being called a militant organization. I think you can see through the voices of our principals, the leadership of our elementary director, everyone sitting here on this table, that is not why we are here. We don't need to say how much we value children. Look at our work, look at our record, come into our schools, look at the love and joy between our colleagues. I feel like, I'm just still stunned by that comment. And I just want to make sure that if my teachers are listening and as my principals are sitting here, that couldn't be further from the truth.
Thank you. I just want to be very cognizant of the time. It is 8:30, 9:30. So I will. 9:30. That's why I said 9:30, because I knew there was going to be a comment on that. But I know, Rachel, Tom, you have questions? Are you leaving?
I have to go. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you. Rachel, do you want to quickly and then?
So I have a comment, but I hope it makes sense at this point in time, but I think it will, because Liz, it goes back to something that you had first said. So first of all, I have a lot of passion around education. I love children. And I think something that all brings us together around this table is that it is all about the kids. And if I get emotional, I apologize, but it is all about the children. That is why we are sitting in this room this morning. That is why we called a special meeting today, because we care about our community. We care that they had questions around elementary art, and we have our 6 wonderful principals in front of us today. We have Ms. Johnson. We have an incredible administration. I'm just going to take a minute here. I was an educator. I taught in Chappaqua, New York. Anyone who knows, that is a fabulous district. I'm sitting in front of administrators that I want at the helm for my children, for my community, because you are doing what is best for children every single day. And you need to know that. And I have your back. I also have the back of this community. And that's why it was good to come together this morning. It is good to ask our questions. And I really thank you for the time. I could look at the weeds, so to speak, because I was in the classroom. I know how we can integrate art in a math classroom. I understand that. I also, as a board member, and this is going back to Liz, what you had said about equity, right? And Becky about their students. These are not robots, right? We also have to take that view of 25,000 feet, and we have to look at the whole child. So yes, art is important. I value art. I do. I also value the time for them to get outside and have PE. I also value the time for them to have music. I also value that, you know what, they need band, they need orchestra, because the trajectory going into middle school, you know, they need to choose, right? And then that follows them into high school. So I value that. I also value that when you speak to parents, you know, it's going to be what's important for their child or for their family, but also it could be different for, you know, each of their children, right? I have 3 children. What one child would like, maybe not the other child. And that's just a reality, right? So maybe some are calling for more art, but we also have heard parents speak up about world language. So like another question, and we'll get an answer right now or later at another board meeting, would be, you know, where is world language? You know, is that an area that you're considering where, you know, minutes could come from? So these are really, I think, positive discussions. I don't want us to get away from that, but I also think it is all about the kids, and all of us as board members, I think, really truly feel a connection to children, and hopefully that's why we're sitting here. So thank you.
Yes.
It wasn't a rhetorical question. Did you really want to know about world language? Of course. Because my mathematical mind
Is
is,
it
you
a
know,
long answer? It'll be a very,
very brief answer, I promise. I think what you heard, and Corey said it well, is that you study K-12, right? You don't just study one area. And so for transparency, I started my career out as a world language teacher. Before I became a bilingual teacher, I was a world language teacher. I taught foreign language at the elementary level. That was my job, and I loved it very much. That said, when you look at world language, you have to look at it K-12. You can't just say, I want world language at the elementary level without understanding the impact of the middle or the high school. Or why do we have Mandarin here, but we don't have Mandarin here? And what's going to happen? Which language are you going to pick? And what is that time going to look like? So yes. And so some of the questions that, the question that Tom asked earlier is like, could we, balance things off? Maybe at one time, but there has to be an assessment of, is this the right time also? In addition to that K-12 pathway, where are our students academically? How are they after this pandemic? And then again, we bring a budget forward recommendation when we've thought all those things through in a thoughtful way, not just, throwing stuff at a wall. That's just not how you can keep an organization moving along in the way that I believe that this organization is moving along in the past couple of years. Very fast.
That was very fast. Thank you. Selena, and then I'll wrap up.
First of all, I wanted to clarify because Liz mentioned that I said that not having art means that's why childhood suicide has risen. That was not my intent behind that statement. What I meant is we have to be careful that we don't stress children so much. And if you look at the media, you can see that children are feeling very, very stressed, very, very stressed. So we need to be careful about that. So if anybody thought that was my intent behind those words, I apologize. I had a friend who committed suicide. So I know that bullying is the number one reason young people commit suicide. That's why I'm so passionate about bullying. Adults should not bully, kids should not bully. So I apologize if anybody thought that. My question is, why can't the schedule go back to the rotation where all have equal number of classes between art, music, and library, rotating with double grades per trimester as we had the year Susie started in the spring, instead of the way music and library doubling, instead of the way music and library are doubling grades for half the year right now, there is no loss to any other subject. Also, I did watch the curriculum meeting, just because I'm interested in what's happening with curriculum. And I was thinking that STEAM should not only involve the library and media specialists, but the art teachers too. It should be a collaborative approach to create units of study that could be done in library as well as the art room. Art teachers are the art experts and library media specialists are the experts in their field. How can librarians teach art lessons without art teachers? Another reason to bring the extra art teachers on board. So there's more to the whole curriculum meeting, but I know we're short on time that I wanted to say about that, but I did really, that was a very interesting curriculum meeting this week.
Thank you. So just to answer very quickly, because I know where we are with time, I feel like the first question, the principals answered. The second question, when Tom asked it, the second question is that is absolutely part of the plan. The art teachers will be working with the library media specialists to design the curriculum, the STEAM-based curriculum that we hope to have art teachers doing some collaboration because there is some time in their schedule. And we do pay teachers, and we have paid teachers, art teachers over the summer, as well as teachers across all content areas to continue to develop that curriculum because that's the time we can actually do that work. So that is absolutely true. That is an integrated collaborative work.
That was quick. Thank you. Because we're short on time. Is it okay if nobody else, Divya? Okay. Just thank you. I didn't get to my questions because of the time, but I think you covered a lot of the feedback we received, a lot of concerns we received, and I thank all the board members who've asked questions. So we can wait for my questions, but I just want to reiterate what Rachel said. Every one of us is sitting here because we're passionate about education. Every single one of us. We care about kids. We want to do our best for kids. And it's obvious you guys do. I really appreciate you taking the time. The reason, as I said at the start of this meeting, is we heard feedback and we wanted to address this the best way we could. I also said at the start of the meeting, there may be a chance that everybody will not be on the same page. We may have opposing views. But I do recognize, just like Rachel's background, my background was different. I went to a boarding school in England, very different experience, completely different. But I have been a parent advocate since my child was in second grade and I just want to say that I have seen the the growth in the way the administration works. I have been part of multiple superintendents, the change at leadership. And we all went through the pandemic. So I do appreciate all the work you do. It is not easy. I truly want to acknowledge every one of you, all the teachers, our board, because we do come together. We've all readjusted our schedule. Liz is online. Couple of them could not be here, but we have, and we're doing it because we care about kids. And we are also at the same time responsive to community because we are sitting here because we are elected members. We were elected by the community. There are questions and feedback. They're what we feel that we have to ask. And this is very important at this time because we're in the budget process and the questions are coming up. As we move forward, there will be a budget adopted by the board, hopefully Monday. And I just encourage the community, I encourage the board that we can continue to have these conversations because when we have these conversations, this amazing discussion happens. And I go back, we don't have to agree on everything, but we have to ask these questions because we speak for not my child, a child, ex-child, 4,000 plus students. And of course, I think Rachel said it, I'll say it again, and Liz said it too. Each child's experience is different. What I want as a parent is completely different from what Rachel would want or Liz would want or ex-parent would want. But we want to represent the best for all students. So again, thank you so much. I think I really appreciate every one of your questions. I really do. And now thank you for everyone. We will go into executive session. So because the secretary is not here, I'm going to call that the Board of Education convene an executive session for the purpose of conducting an interview with the Veterans Park Elementary School Principal candidate and invite Superintendent Dr. De Silva, Assistant Superintendent Corey Gillette, Assistant Superintendent of Special Services, Elizabeth Hanaway, the Director of Personal Karen Dewing, Director of Finance, Jill Brown, and the candidate.
Tina, I'm going to opt out of the executive session, so I'll be dropping off now.
Okay,
She has to
thank you,
hop on.
Liz.
We read lips.
Okay, we